Hello, welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. My name's Robert Winters.
I'm Judy Nathans.
And today is December 20th, 2016.
Right.
And
Getting close to the end.
getting definitely close.
In many ways.
Trying to close out. I think what I used is my tagline for the city council meeting when I write up my notes every week.
Yeah.
I wrote something like closing down a most unusual year.
Right. That's right, because that was the last meeting, because it's holidays, right?
Yeah, there are no more city council meetings. There is an ordinance committee meeting, I believe, tomorrow.
Yes, I saw that. 3 o'clock?
Yeah, I think it's another one having to do with all the marijuana stuff.
Well, it has to add something to the inclusionary zoning thing or something.
I think the inclusionary zoning is having their big hearing on December 4th.
Right, that's a separate, but this is like to change some language in that. I don't know.
Yeah,
something to do
something
with
about
that.
table of uses and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah, we're starting with the esoterica, I guess, right? Actually, it is interesting not to delve off too deeply into the medical marijuana and recreational marijuana aspect of things, but it does sort of seem now now that we've passed, was it last Thursday, I think, the legalization of recreational.
To grow it within your house?
Right, but the thing is also just to possess it is now no longer a crime.
Can you buy it on the street?
That's all sort of gray.
The whole thing is ridiculous.
You can actually, I think I heard a Mass State Police person say, I think the buyer would not be breaking any rules by buying it, but the seller would be.
Oh, geez.
So they could arrest the seller, but not the buyer. It's very,
even if you have less than, because even now there's less restriction. You can have a couple of ounces.
I think
it's the selling of it.
I think most cops aren't going to really make a big stink about it much of it anyway.
And you can grow it inside, but not outside your house.
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting to see as we sort of start into 2017, not just in Cambridge, but also in a lot of other surrounding communities. How they will actually handle the regulation of the recreational marijuana and how it dovetails in with the medical marijuana. Because I've always felt at the start that the medical marijuana places that were getting licensed and cited and having zoning changes to allow them to be cited were in a sense getting their foot in the door early because everybody.
And look how long it's taking.
Right, but the thing is once they'll actually be set up and running, and then they can just quick transition, and they could do both.
Add an annex or something,
Yeah. So anyway, it'd be interesting to see how that shapes up.
Of course, cities and towns have the option to also have another referendum or something and not have it in their town, right?
Yeah,
you have to let citizens vote for it.
I don't know. Does it require an actual referendum, or can the local legislature make that determination?
The local? What do you mean the local?
Like a city council?
I don't think so. Not if the voters voted for it.
No, I think it might.
I think they have to have a vote.
I think that may be spelled out in the law, the initiative petition that was passed, but I didn't read it as carefully as I
didn't either. Kevin Cullen today had an article, which I did not read, about how people did not read all of that and how confusing the whole thing is.
It is actually pretty confusing. So we'll see how it shakes down. It is very possible that the state legislature may enact some modifications.
That's true. They said they would even before Yeah. So it'll be a while, folks, before you can buy recreational, I think. At a place.
Are you kidding? All of the people who watch this show, I heard they get high before they tune in. Is that true?
Oh wow! I don't know if you're out there watching us, high or not, just let us know. Okay.
All right. So
there were 2 city council meetings before.
Yeah, because we weren't here last week.
Right.
Because we were busy being good civic doobies.
Going to the meeting, which we'll talk about.
Right, but might as well just sort of, we'll go back a little reverse chronologically here.
Right.
So this being December 20th, they did have the last city council meeting, Cambridge City Council meeting of the year on the 19th, last night. Relatively short agenda, and I was joking around a little bit with the mayor afterwards, how sometimes the meetings with the shortest agendas can sometimes. Well, no, sometimes they have a tendency to kind of stretch out.
Because they have a little agenda, but let's just milk this.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's because there's if there's relatively few pressing matters on the agenda, it's almost like giving license to the elected officials to just get into a little speech making.
And it's also, as you say, becoming an election year soon.
It is definitely making you're already starting to feel it. Even at the economic, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but at the Economic Development and University Relations Committee, you can already see some of the signs of political posturing for the municipal election starting up.
Yep.
Definitely there.
Right,
I've got my detector on.
Yeah.
I can tell.
Yeah.
So it was interesting at the meeting last night, just to sort of start off with the most trivial. When I was writing up my snarky little comments about the meeting, I was just noting how there were these several items about these little A-frames, sandwich boards that rest out on the sidewalks of Central Square, Harvard Square, and various other places around the city.
Usually retail establishments.
Usually, in front of little businesses and such. Whether they are necessary or not, or whether because one person is doing it, the other person wants to do it, who knows?
Do they pay for that, by the way?
They do pay a fee to the city.
A one-time fee?
I think you have to reapply every year.
Oh, okay.
For it. Now, many establishments have just put them out, and it's sort of like
in violation without even asking?
Well, it's like in basketball, no whistle, no foul.
Oh, until someone says something.
Yeah, and so actually I think one person pointed out that one of the applications that was on the agenda for a new sandwich board was for October of 2016, which has already passed.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, so some of these places have certainly been putting the signs out for all along, and only are now getting around to actually getting the appropriate permitting for them. The reason why I was just highlighting them was not only because, well, they were on the agenda and why not, right? But because there was two, I think, from last April that were never acted on. They were just put on the table, and they just seemed pretty benign. And they just sat there, and I thought, well, if I was a business and I asked them to do what was they thought it was a relatively simple thing of getting the okay to do what other businesses are doing around the city, to be sort of stuck on the table and sort of forgotten about is.
But maybe they forgot about it because you'd think it wouldn't.
Or they gave up. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Or else, I think in the case of one place, they just put the sign out anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you know they just didn't put the sign out?
I think, unless you're really kind of a follower of civic things, you might think, well, I made my application. It's in process now, so I can just sort of proceed in business.
I'll pay for it when you tell me to.
Yeah, I can remember when I set up a nonprofit for Cambridge Recycling once upon a time. And I remember when you applied for 501c3 status, they said you could operate as though you were approved, even before the approvals all came through.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just how it works sometimes. And so anyway, so there were some that were just languishing away on the agenda, and then there were, I think, about 5 new applications for them. And I just sort of made a little lighthearted comment or two about the year of the year of the mountainous molehill, where people were elected officials were making such a big deal out of things that are in the big grand scheme of things are kind of trivial.
Well, I don't know. I don't understand why it even has to come to their attention. Why isn't it just up to the licensing or the permitting people to inspect and say okay or not?
Because the city council never ceded that authority to the other board.
Well, why don't they?
Maybe they should.
Better things to do?
When Marjorie Decker was on the city council, she used to regularly make the point that when people are applying for curb cuts for properties, she wondered, why do we have to decide this at the city council?
So why is there opposition to that?
I think that the reason is that sometimes people would think, well, maybe this is a triviality most of the time, but every once in a while when we want some leverage over somebody, we might be able to deny them their curb cut and force them to do something.
Well, then be aware of who is applying for this at those departments, and if you see something like that, then you can say, I think we should discuss this even if it's not official.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think that really what's called for, and I think maybe we're heading in this direction.
I hope so.
It would be great if we could do it for curb cuts as well as the signs. Is just to make clearer what the standards are, and as long as you meet the standards, you were okay with it.
I mean, it puts more of the onus onto the permitting people, but obviously somebody's got to get the job done.
I mean, these are, even if the council retains authority, these things should be just sort of formalities.
I just feel like it's ridiculous.
Well, I mean,
they're being paid a lot of money to do those kinds of things.
Now, there are some shop owners who will put, or somebody from the shop will stick the sign like right out in the middle of the sidewalk, and if a person was a blind person, they might run right into it.
But that could happen whether they decide or not. I mean, someone has to be.
It's a matter of how you actually carry it out, right? Now, Owen O'Riordan from the Commissioner of Public Works, I think he said that the signs, I think the rule is it's supposed to be within a certain short distance of the curb.
Right, so that
so you're really supposed to move it out to the street.
Right.
But if you do that, then you're not capturing the attention of some of the pedestrians nearly as much as you might wish.
Right, but you can't. Yeah.
Right, so they want to have I think the standard is you want to have something like 4.5, 5 feet of sidewalk, certainly the minimum, whatever the minimum is for handicap access, and then some, just so you're not obstructing the public way.
That's assuming all sidewalks have the same dimensions
But they
everywhere
don't.
in Cambridge. I was going to say, they don't.
All right, and that was actually
So-
brought up last night. I
Yeah.
think Dennis Carlone was
Yeah.
pointing that out especially.
Yeah.
So in certain circumstances, maybe it should be just considered an impossibility and you can't have it.
Yeah.
But they just should just set the standards. But boy,
Yeah.
did it turn into a long-winded discussion last night.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was kind of ridiculous. And in the end, they approved most of them then.
A long-winded discussion by, on what was the gist of it? I mean, why was there so much
think-
discussion?
I think there is one city councilor, Councilor Devereaux, who
Yeah, he
sort
is
of has
concerned
made
about
it a
these.
big
Yeah.
issue. There's
Yeah.
a few, not many, members of the public who repeatedly bring it up in public comment that they don't like the fact that certain signs are put in certain places.
Okay.
You know, and she's very receptive to those members of the
Kind of
public.
like people who don't like billboards, but to me, they're a lot more
Right.
benign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know, it's interesting. You know, I would characterize this year as you know, at least one of the big features of the 2016 version of the Cambridge City Council has been a remarkable attention given to things like lighting, signs,
What we
and
see.
signage. Yeah.
Our visual
so sort of the visual,
landscape.
yeah, what
Yeah.
you see when you're sort of walking
Our
down the street.
commercial visual landscape.
Right.
I think that's really the
Well,
issue.
yes and no. I mean, the thing is, the
Well, who's
lighting
putting the
ordinance.
lighting? It's all commercial
Lighting
stuff.
ordinance, when these changes to this lighting ordinance
Yeah.
was originally meant to prevent intrusion into bedrooms and stuff.
Right.
So I think it was more probably fair to say, from obnoxious neighbors with big bright lights, or from a person
Well, it
living
could be
next
from
to
a
a
big
parking
building
lot with a big-
next to
big
an
light.
apartment building.
Yeah. But, you know, it was interesting. I was coming back. I can't remember whether I was walking or taking the bus or driving the other day through parts of Kendall Square. And I was thinking about, you know, with all of our obsession about not putting much prominent signage on buildings.
Yeah.
And I just was looking at all the buildings in Kendall
Kendall.
Square and, you know, marching up Main Street. And I looked and I said, you know, if I didn't know what was in these buildings, I would have no idea what was in the buildings, because
There's no signage.
they're thoroughly anonymous.
Well, because most of them are academic. They're MIT owned. They're labs. They're not.
Right.
It's not Microsoft.
Yeah.
Even Microsoft.
And
doesn't-
you know, I don't think we should be sort of overdoing it, but
No.
you know, I don't mind having a little bit of signage. You know, a little bit of identification.
It has the address.
Yeah, I mean, they allow it for hotels, but
I
apparently
think they
not.
want it that way. Some of that stuff's very proprietary. What
No,
they're
actually,
doing there,
actually,
you know?
most of these places actually wanted more signage, and they weren't granted as
really?
much signage
Oh,
as they
okay.
actually
All right.
wanted. They want to have put little logos or colors
Oh,
or
so
whatever.
you're saying it was
They-
not their choice and
Yeah,
stuff?
Microsoft was able to get away with it
Well,
by putting
Microsoft
it
has a
inside the
big-
building, so it
That's
sort
true.
of
Reflects
shines
out.
through
You're
the
right.
through the windows, you know.
Right.
But
Google's down there, right?
yeah, and then they have
Yeah.
very, very big loud signage.
They do?
Yeah, but I think that was because they're exempt because they're in the so-called MXD district.
Oh,
And
yeah. You
the
mentioned that
city
somewhere
council
in your
doesn't make
notes.
that approval, nor does the planning board. I think
Cambridge redevelopment?
there was the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority has some authority
Yes,
to
I
permit
saw that
those there.
today
So
when I looked at
anyway, I just sort of find it's interesting that there's
40 minutes on that, huh?
yeah, they spend a tremendous amount of time on that. One other thing which is sort of interesting, kind of a difficult decision, I think, to be made. There was an article in the Boston Globe recently about
The Globe.
there was an officer, Peter Neal, Cambridge police officer, who's one of the people who manages the dogs. You know, there are I think there are
a
five.
retirement of a dog.
So they were
Okay.
brought in as police dogs
Right.
for, you know, checking suspicious packages, bomb
Right.
sniffers, whatever. So they, you know, there's a fair amount of money going into the training of these dogs. But, you know, if you're the regular handler of the dog, you develop a bond. So what happens when the police officer who has used to, you know, having this dog named Rumba, is now retiring. So there's this, you know, this sort of a sad story in
Yeah.
the Globe saying, well, shouldn't he be able to
He's
get the
requested,
dog?
right?
He's requested. The
Yeah.
police department basically said no.
Because the dog's
Apparently.
not retiring, right?
Dog's not retiring. He's got a
Yeah.
lot of good serviceable years, and basically and it was interesting to hear
This
various.
came up before city council?
Yeah, because there's a city council order from Councilor Chung basically saying it's the will, the wish of the city council that, he should be allowed to do this.
Oh my gosh, really?
Councilor Chung then modified his perspective a little bit, assisted by the mayor, to basically say, we'd like a report back from the police department why this would be a burden, et cetera, et cetera. But it is sort of a dilemma, these people, they do kind of get bonded together with the dog, but the dog is essentially a piece of police equipment.
Has this never happened before?
There was.
Must be a precedent.
I heard from Gary Mello last night that there was a dog officer 30 years ago who had not a dog officer, but an officer who handled a police dog. But the current situation where we have, I believe it's 5 police dogs they're sort of like, they go to public events, they interact with people.
They're trained. They're expensive.
Yeah, so they're trained professional dogs, to check out suspicious packages.
Yeah.
So they're not just pets, and so it's a dilemma because they are friendly dogs and they do develop bonds with their handlers. And it's kind of a dilemma. And as Councilor Toomey pointed out, there's another police officer who's one of the ones who handles one of the other dogs who is set to retire a few months from now, too. So what happens? Are you supposed to, every time you...
Is the idea that the bonding makes them work better? Because I would think they should just trade off every month then to get used to other people.
Well, I think it's sort of like, you have a dog gets used to responding to commands in a particular way from particular people.
I think if they're willing to pay for a new dog and the training,
the offer is there, but it might actually be very expensive.
Well, then that's
I know
it.
I actually think that is sort of
unless it's like a duck that you imprint on one thing and you can't work with.
Well, it was interesting because I think city councilors last night kind of correctly pointed out, we don't want to seem like ogres,
right?
But
it's a budgetary matter.
There's a really good reason why the police department might be resistant to actually giving up 1 or 2 of its 5 important assets.
Right.
And by the way, one of the very important functions that these dogs perform is that there are a lot of calls because they say if you see something, say something, right? So they say there's a suspicious package. Now, if you didn't have the dogs, then what do? You have to go through a very big protocol, bring in the robots and check it out, and then it turns out to be...
It's called Rumba.
Right. But there's Tango, there's Rumba. Some of them are brothers and sisters.
I see.
And the 99.9% of the time, it turns out there's nothing in the package, but there would be a lot of time involved in actually checking it out. The dogs can just go, boom, check it out, boom, okay, it's all clear.
They use them in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've heard of soldiers bringing back their bomb-sniffing dogs too.
But so it's a dilemma, but I guess, as cruel as it may sound, I guess I have to kind of fall on the side of the police department.
If they're willing to put the money in and then fine.
I think maybe when it's time for the dog to retire, maybe, the handlers should have, first say in where the dog retires, maybe. So maybe something like that would work out pretty well.
So that was last night too.
That was last night.
It's a really exciting agenda here.
It was actually.
I mean,
dogs and science, right?
Okay.
And one other thing, a big part of the discussion last night, also relates to the Economic Development Committee meeting of last week, which is it's an ongoing controversy about the. These buildings that were purchased by, is it Equity One?
Equity One, which is the Abbott building. Yeah.
The Abbott building in the old Corcoran's. Is that the hardware store?
That's the urban. That's the whole corner, right?
Or it kind of wraps around. It actually faces onto JFK, but then it also comes out onto Brattle.
Right.
And all right, so that's been undergoing review. They were seeking I think they actually got, in principle, demolition approval for the Brattle Street side where the old Corcoran's was.
Well, you're really dating yourself. Right now, it's not Urban Outfitters. What is it?
I don't even remember. My focus is so much on Central
it's that fancy clothing store. There's a lot of things there. Yeah.
But so this has been going under process through the Historical Commission, who've been, because the whole area is a, what do they call it, a conservation district,
Not buildings per se, but the area, right?
Right, but the thing is that includes the buildings. So you can't just knock things down. It has to go through review, and the Historical Commission has a lot of authority in this.
Okay.
Some people would like to give them even more authority, but they certainly have a fair amount of authority.
Right.
And it was an interesting debate going on last night because.
Are we talking about, this is in reference to that committee meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, yes and no, because there was
All right.
there was a city council order proposed calling on for the landmarking of the Abbott building.
Right, that happened at that meeting, someone
Right,
brought
which is
that up.
part of this. Again,
Right.
for those who've been heard it in the context of the Curious George.
Right, which is the corner of
store,
it, but
which
it
is the
goes back
corner.
on both sides.
Right.
Okay.
So anyway, there was a public petition actually calling for landmarking of the building, and there was a city council calling for the landmarking of the building. But it was an interesting discussion in the sense that so Charlie Sullivan from the Cambridge Historical Commission was there.
Last night.
Yeah, last night, and he was like the city staff person responding to this item, but both for the order. And I think just for because of the order.
Right.
And he made the point. He says, well, this is all well and good, but when you do a landmarking of a building, that involves a lot of staff time to do a big full-blown study.
Okay.
But then he made the point, and I think correctly, but it actually adds nothing of value beyond the review that they already have the authority to do today.
Right, so why do it? Right?
Basically, that's the point. And there were several city councilors who then say, well, if landmarking this building here is just going to cause a lot of staff time to be expended and will add nothing of value in terms of review, why are we calling on doing it?
Who said that?
David Marr did, and Craig Kelly.
I was going to say Craig Kelly.
Yeah.
Sounds like,
a
I mean,
little
I would
late-
have said that too.
Right. A little later on, you hear Tim Toomey was starting to become pretty convinced, because he had originally, as he said, felt that he would be inclined to go along with the landmarking, initiating a landmarking study.
Until he heard all these things.
But then he's like, well, now I'm not so sure.
Right.
So I think what they're going to do is several councilors are actually going to get a walking tour with Charlie Sullivan to sort of give a better perspective about the whole picture.
Okay.
But it was kind of interesting. I mean, I think it was a lot of sort of bowing to public pressure to do this landmarking, even if in fact it was completely valueless.
Not going to be, yeah.
But then some other city councilors would say, no, I think we have to do this because we're going to delay the project. And then Charlie pointed out, I said, I think, Councilor, I believe you're actually misinformed. That's what he said. He says, this doesn't delay anything. Anybody can still continue to apply for permits and proceed, regardless. And I think we had a pretty good case. So anyway, it was interesting, and I think it's relevant in the context of the meeting we were at last week.
Right, which is where all of this came up, and Charlie was there too.
Exactly, and
He presented.
Right. The meeting that we're referring to last week was this Economic Development and University Relations Committee, which was a little more general in nature.
Right, but they all showed up, or at least their representatives did. Harvard, Equity One.
Yeah, so it wasn't just the one property owner.
No,
It was much more
Morningside,
generally.
which is basically Gerald Chan's group.
Right.
And he owns a ton of buildings, which I didn't know
Yeah,
about.
and Trinity, which is represented by
Trinity.
John DiGiovanni.
Right.
His family's
Okay.
they own quite a few buildings in around Harvard Square as
Did
well.
he talk? I don't.
He did. He very much did.
I don't see his name. Trinity Private. They came in later.
And it was interesting. They were making some interesting points. I think there was a certain contention made. It is certainly suggested that in fact people are just jacking all the rents up like mad, and John DiGiovanni said something I thought was pretty interesting. He said that for his properties, they actually
Which are his properties?
a lot of them are sort of, well, I'm not going to say only because I'm not 100% sure.
All right.
But they got a bunch, and they don't actually put out set rents.
Oh, John Giovanni. He's the president of the Harvard Square Business Association, too.
He does.
Okay.
But he says they don't actually have a fixed asking price for their commercial spaces.
Yeah.
Basically, they seek out tenants or they respond to requests from potential tenants. And then they basically negotiate a price.
Yes.
And it is often driven by percent of potential sales.
Right. I have a quote from him. Rents will be coming down. Retail sales are dropping.
Right. So he was making the point that, I mean, it was interesting. I think Councilor Mazin said that, he said, actually, what he said, it was an interesting quote. He said, "We're all in agreement on keeping property values down."
Property values down.
Well, that's what he said.
Yeah. Do you think he meant that?
Yeah,
Or
I
was
think
he
that's what he
confused
meant.
by what he meant?
And I wrote that and I said, I don't think we're all in agreement about that because,
Yeah.
and then the representative from CDD said, well, I don't think that that's really what our
Which
agenda
CD
is.
Oh, the community development.
Community development
Yeah,
department.
right, exactly.
That in fact, and I think several of the representatives of the business community and the community development department said it's not necessarily the property values that we're trying to contain, control, or otherwise
Right.
dictate. What we're really trying to do is to create a really good sense of place in Harvard Square that drives people to there, and then that will support the businesses and whatever the rents happen to be, because they'll be determined by the market, that there'll be clientele there, so everybody will do well. You know, as opposed to trying to control the rents or control the property values or control. Anyway, I thought it was a pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah.
It was.
Now, were we talking about the committee last week? Were we talking about that
A
conversation?
little bit of both.
Yeah. No, I was very eye-opening to me. I learned things I didn't know.
Yeah, the discussion at the council meeting last night was specifically about the landmarking, and I certainly
Yeah.
became convinced that the landmarking of the building was completely superfluous
Yeah.
because of the status of the whole district. And the Historical Commission has plenty of authority already to do what they need to do, and they're already doing. Everything's in process. They're reviewing it, and we'll sort of see how it goes.
Do you remember, did Leland's, I know at last week's meeting, this isn't a quote, but I have notes under his name, Curious George needs to stay there. We'll introduce a zoning petition
I
to
have,
stop the bad guys. Did he actually say to stop the bad, or did I put
He
that
did say
in?
something like that, but I
Did he
heard.
mention it last night again?
We're almost out of time here, but I'm going to
Oh,
say that I
yeah.
heard from a little birdie
Yeah.
that Curious George may very well be getting relocated nearby very
Okay.
soon.
All right, well, we'll continue
stay
this because there's
tuned.
some, I'll
So-
mention what you said too.
So we'll be back in a few seconds on
right.
Cambridge Inside Out.